I'm going to walk you guys through my steps of how I true my wheel. If you guys follow these steps, I guarantee you that you guys will have a wheel that will stay truer longer and have a much more reliable wheel to ride in the future. Okay, so before you get started, remove your tire off your rims or off your wheels, because you will actually need to measure how round the wheel is, and you can't do that with your tire. So before we get started, or if you want to get started with me, take your wheel or take your tire off the wheel, and I will catch you guys in a couple minutes. Now these are, I have tubes in here, but these are actually tubeless rims or tubeless compatible rims. So the tire is on a little tighter than usual. Okay, so that's why it's taken me a little bit more time to make sure that the bead is completely off the rim first. And once I have achieved that, I can then safely remove the tire without damaging the tubes, the inner tube. Okay. Alright, so once you've removed one side of the tire, you simply reach in and gently remove the tube. And take your time, don't rush anything. Alright, so that was pretty easy. Okay, so now that the wheel is on, all you need is a spoke wrench. I have mine from DT Swiss. I got this like 10 years ago for like 15 bucks. These are great. But most of the truing stands that you guys will buy will have a nipple wrench or spoke wrench of some sort. But yeah, so first thing I do is I make sure that I only use one of these arm levers here. These will kind of tell you where the center of the rims are. I use one because it makes it really easy to keep track of, and especially for beginners, don't use two and try to measure and try to figure out where the center of the rim is. That's actually not important, and I'll tell you guys why in a little bit. So all I do here is I lube all of my nipples and all of the spoke holes first. I don't, that way during the process, if I find the spoke that needs to get trued, I don't pick up this bottle and re-lube everything. So it makes it a lot easier just to lube everything up front, and that's what I'll do. And all you need is a drop in each spoke hole and nipple. And you're not wasting anything. This is very much vital to the longevity of your wheel, so don't be afraid to to use this lube, and that's what it's for. So these wheels have about 2,000 miles on them. I typically like to true my wheels or check my wheels once a year, and typically around the end of winter entering the spring, because a lot of my riding happens in the spring and summer. And again, this is not something that's necessary. The wheels were riding fine. I rode my bike really just last weekend, and everything rode fine. But it's just regular maintenance that I like to do for myself. Okay, so the next thing I like to do is check for the spoke tension. So I just run through each pair of spokes that run parallel to each other, and I just grab, both sides, and I squeeze, give it a nice firm squeeze, and see if any spokes. The popping is normal. It's just the spokes rubbing. That's not a big deal. But if I want to see if there are any spokes that feel really, or they're flexing too much, and all of the spokes right now are pretty equally tensioned, and so the tension is good. The wheel is in good shape. Okay, so what I do now is I just turn the wheel, and I use one of these measuring arms here, and find out where the uneven spot is. Now you do hear that, but it's really not dramatic at all. It's really, really minor. And yeah, so this wheel is actually in pretty good shape, but there is a spot that is slightly off. And so all you do is, instead of tightening the spokes on the other side, now that you've found that spot, that high spot, you can do one of two things. You can either loosen the spoke directly in front of it, so that you kind of relieve that tension, or you can tighten the two spokes on the opposite side of the rim. Now in this case, because I have ridden these wheels about 2,000 miles, there is a slightly higher chance that it's better if I tighten the opposite spokes, because then now you're actually adding more tension to the wheel. If you loosen this nipple here, you may be taking too much tension away. So in this case, just to be a little bit more safe, I will tighten by 1/4 of a turn on the two spokes directly across from the high spot. Now you can see that sound is completely gone. So now I spin again. There's a tiny spot there. That's really not even considered a high spot. That's just like probably imperfections of the rim itself, but there is an ever slight spot there. So I'll just grab that spoke on the opposite side, and I'll turn 1/4 of a turn. Okay. Now it's not unusual that when you tighten something and you spin the wheel again, and then you hear another spot somewhere else. That's very, very normal. What's happening is since you're creating tension in the wheel, that tension has to move somewhere, and oftentimes it's kind of you're chasing the mouse, chasing your own tail type of thing, where you tighten one spoke, something else tightens, and something else shifts. That's very normal in wheel building. Don't get frustrated. Don't get annoyed. That's very normal. So again, right here, I'm going to tighten by 1/4 of a turn. Okay, so there's a tiny little spot, and again, this is not even considered anything substantial. And sometimes you have to eyeball it to see the reflection of the little arm here. That was me pushing on the rim too hard. Okay. Okay. Now that sound there is really, it's more of a tiny little hop. You don't have to worry too much about that right now. Okay, now what you want to do is I take my dishing stick. Okay, so to build a wheel properly, you need some sort of way to make sure that the wheel is centered. Okay, and you can use the WAG4. This is by Park Tools. I've had this for 10 years or so, and it's called the Professional Wheel Alignment Gauge. But it's really just a dishing stick to make sure that the wheel is right in the center. So all you need to do is I should remove my spokes. not my spokes, my skewer. Sorry about that. Okay, so one way to make sure that the wheel is aligned properly. So when you true a wheel, there's three things that you need to check for, and this is something that a lot of people don't address in some of the videos that I've seen, is you make sure that the wheel is true, okay? And then you have to make sure that the wheel is centered, and then you have to make sure that the roundness of the wheel is also as round as the wheel can be. So by using this tool, I will know exactly if the hub is centered relative to the rims. Now it's off by, it looks like a millimeter or so. So all I need to do is make sure that I know which side that I want to tighten. And so since the little arm here is touching this, you see it's literally just sliding over it, but just barely touching it by a millimeter, maybe even less than a millimeter. So it means that I need to tighten this side of the wheel so that I can bring the hub closer to the other side, okay? All right, so I know that now I need to tighten this spoke. So now that the spoke's on this side of the rim or the wheel. So I will go through, instead of actually going through and finding my high spot, first I will actually make sure that the wheel is actually round. Okay, so this will, instead of going back and forth from side to side, I'm going one side, roundness, other side, and then before going back to this side, I'll go this side, check the roundness, and then the other side of the spokes. So now we do the same thing. Now we're checking for roundness now. There's two high spots on this wheel right now. Okay, so the first high spot expands only 2 spokes or so. About 2.5, 3 spokes. So it's these 3 spokes that need to be tightened. Now, keep in mind, I also know that I need to tighten the spokes on this side of the wheel. So I may tighten these 2 spokes first, leave this middle spoke alone, because if I tighten this spoke here, it'll pull the wheel to the other side, which I don't want. So, quarter of a turn. Now you see there's only one high spot now. So that method works. We're going to find this. Again, it spans exactly 3 spokes. So I'm going to tighten the 2 spokes that are on the right side, or on my right now, where I actually want to bring the tension to. Okay, so you see that. Now you can go a little bit more tighter and tighten this knob, and it lifts this this meter up, and you can find that exactly. So when you hear little tiny scratches, don't worry about that. But when you hear obvious grinds, that's when you know that that is the part where you actually want to tighten. But little tiny scratches that are like really minor, don't worry about it. So there's really 2 spots. There's this spot and this spot. This here is really not a high spot. That's more of a rim imperfection, which I really ignore most of the time. Again, that's a tiny little scratch there. So this guy is what I need to address. And again, I'm going to tighten the 2 spokes on the side that I want to tighten the spokes on, based on my alignment tool. Okay. Again, do the same thing. Okay, so this spot here, again, is really just a tiny scratch, but if you want to address it, and you want to check to see where that noise starts and where it ends. And this one literally sits in between two spokes. You guys really can't see it, but if I were to put my finger and show you where the spoke is actually sitting, it's right here. So that noise, it's literally sitting right here, and that's in between the two spokes. And so if you want, you can tighten both spokes, or just a spoke on the right side of the rim that you know that you have to tighten anyways to get the rim centered. In this case, I'm going to do it just a quarter turn to see if that noise goes away. Not quite, so I'll tighten maybe the other side by a quarter of a turn. Okay, so that solved it. So the wheel now I know is perfect, or not perfectly round, but very, very round. Now I know that I need to tighten the spokes on this side. So I look for my high spots again. Now again, instead of loosening the spokes on the left side, I'm going to tighten the spokes on the right side. Okay. So that noise, the high spot, spans about 3 spokes on the right side, so about 6 spokes altogether. And so all I'm going to do is turn. Now instead of doing a quarter turn at this point, I'm just going to do a 1/8 turn on 3 spokes that are on the right side of the wheel. Okay. Now that high spot is like a couple microns thick at this point. I can just do a 1/8 turn. Okay, so I got one more high spot, and it sits directly between 2 spokes again. I'm just going to tighten one spoke, the spoke closest to the high spot, by 1/8 of a turn. And the wheel looks really good at this point. So now all I do is use my alignment tool, make sure that the wheel is centered. So now I know that the spokes are all pretty evenly tensioned. I'm going to check the tension with my spoke meter in a minute, but the roundness of the wheel is very, very, very round. And one last check with the alignment tool. Okay, so it's now slightly tight or slightly higher on the opposite side of the rim or the wheel. So I'm just going to turn the wheel. Now it's higher by a 1/2 millimeter or so. At this point, it's pretty good to go, but I'm a little OCD when it comes to making my wheels completely true and round, or as round as I can. There's no such thing as a perfectly round or true wheel. You just can't do that. And so for me, I just want to make sure that my wheels are as round and true as I can possibly get them. So now, instead of actually going back and just tightening the spokes on this side, looking for high spots and then tightening the spokes, I'm going to go for the roundness once again. Check for its roundness, making sure that the roundness is good, or as round as the wheel can get. Then I go back and tighten the spot of the spokes that tell me where the high spots are. Okay, so the wheel is pretty much round. It's not telling me anything at this point. I turned this knob a little too much, but that little skip there is not something you even have to worry about. But I'm just gonna tighten this area. Okay, and that is gone. Okay, so now I go back, I look for any high spots, and by this point, once I correct any high spots that are left, the wheel should be as good as the wheel can get at this point. Okay, so you have one high spot here. Again, I just want to find out where the high spot starts and where it ends. Okay, so it ends right here. So all I do is tighten the two spokes that are closest to that high spot. And I'm tightening the spokes on the right side of the wheel, or my right, because I want to bring the hub to the left side of the wheel. And that tiny little scratch again, you can barely hear it. There we go. So that's another high spot. And it only spans 3 spokes, but the highest point is on the opposite side and on the side that I actually want to tighten. So that's the right side, which I'll tighten. Okay, so all the high spots are gone, and the wheel seems extremely straight to me. So now, just to make sure, I am going to check my alignment. Okay, it's good there. Okay, perfect. See how it slides over across the hub there? So it's just grazing. But that is, now that we're done, all I'm going to do, and this is just something I do personally, it's not something that's necessary, is I like to check the tension of the spokes. Now this is a very affordable tension meter that I bought from Park Tools. It's lasted me a very long time. I think these are like 40-50 bucks. And something I check, as long as all the values are between, that are reading, 15 or 19. The scales, actually they give you a the kind of conversion table here, and so these are the 1.7 millimeters, and you just go to the blade, to the round steel 1.7, and you kind of go by the numbers that it's reading you. So this all converts to Newton pounds and Newton force. So yeah, just so as long as all my numbers that are reading between 15 and 19 on this meter, I'm good. Yeah, so 17, yeah, 18. So you don't have to check every single spoke, but you can if you want to. I normally just jump around and find every third spoke or every fourth spoke. That will give you a pretty good indication of where the tension is. But when I'm building my wheel from the very start, I do measure every single spoke. So there it is. Sorry for the long-winded explanation, but that's how I check my wheels once a year, and that's obvious. When I have a big crash or if I have hit a big pothole, then I'll do this over again. But once a year, this is how I check my wheels. And this is, in my practice in building wheels for about 10 years now, this is the most safeguard way to make sure that your wheels stay true, stay round, and are aligned properly. So that is it for this video. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, give it a thumbs down. And if there are any questions that you guys have about wheel building in very specifically, I will answer them. Just hit me up with one of the social medias below, or send me a comment. Let me know what you guys are curious about. I have a lot more videos coming out soon. There are going to be some really fun rim comparisons. My new 2016 rim comparisons coming out pretty soon. So subscribe and be on top of it. But yeah, I will catch you guys in the next video.